So like I said, for today's section, we're going to do a reflection on ASEE. We would like to hear about your thoughts about the conference, specifically related to the sessions that the Committee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion sponsored. And so here are some guiding questions. We're not going to break out into any breakout groups because there are only about 12 of us on the call today. So please feel free to share your thoughts on each one of these questions. And we're going to start out with the what are your thoughts about the conference question. I've provided the link up here, so please access the slides with this bit.ly. That way you can type in our slide. Let's see. I am going to assume everybody has found it. And Megan provided the link in the chat box as well. So let's go ahead to our first question. And it's, what are your thoughts about the conference? So feel free to unmute at any time when you're ready to chime in.
I just want to give snaps to the CDEI sessions on the whole were, in my experience, some of the highest quality run, both in terms of like very clear. I love the beginning slides where we establish expectations, including like we're not all going to solve all the world's problems today. Consistently closed captioning, which I think I saw a transcript for a video in one other session, but otherwise, accessibility-wise, it was kind of lacking during the conference. But not CDEI, y'all had closed captioning, so that was good. And also the quality of conversations was good. So I commend CDEI's quality in terms of conversations, actual logistics, and accessibility concerns.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. And as a plug, the opportunity to submit workshops for 2021 is just around the corner. So you too could lead a workshop with our awesome team for next summer. So start thinking about those workshops and what you want to present, both at the conference and during the virtual virtual series that we'll launch for the next school year as well. Appreciate your support, Emily.
I agreed that the virtual conference did provide some access options for people who perhaps couldn't afford to travel or had childcare issues or whatever. So although I certainly enjoy an in-person conference more, and I don't want to go away from that, I really hope that ASEE will spend some time this year figuring out how we can extend access to people who can't physically travel and what that's going to take.
All right, thank you so much for that, Kim. That is something that we do need to consider because there's a lot of ambiguity in what's to come. Anyone else want to reflect on this question about how you felt? What are your thoughts about the conference?
One thing I really liked about the conference this year, because it was online and all the presentations were recorded, I didn't feel conflicted when I had a scheduling conflict. There was a lot of presentations that went on at the exact same times as other presentations that I wanted to see, but I was able to go back and watch the recording of that presentation. So I felt like I was able to kind of catch up on some of that research and see, get a further to see if I wanted to read more of that paper or if they answered some of the questions or get some of that contact information. I wanted to reach out to some of those authors. So I really liked that flexibility that was offered because of the online format. And then since this is the first time that I actually participated in a workshop session at an ASEE conference, usually I just go to some of the 20-minute presentations that the authors give on their papers. And so I really liked the dialogue discussions that we're having around engineering, and not just about, here's the research paper that I created on this topic, and it's all about what I did in my space and not so much how to transition that into your space. So just having that ability to just have that dialogue around what people have done and seen in these different perspectives, I really appreciated that. And I think having this online platform made us more aware of that's what's needed, because we all knew that people would get tired of sitting on Zoom and just listening to people talk, right? And so we all thought like it needs to be more interactive in these workshops. So I think even if we go back to the in-person conferences, I think having more of these built-in dialogue, hands-on kind of discussion workshops should be more of a focus as well.
So I want to ask a question to sort of spin on this is, when we did our DEI 100 and 200 sessions last year, we had like 10, 15 people show up. And in the sessions this year, we had over 100 for like 115, about 115 for both 100 and 200. And I think on Friday afternoon, we had like 70 or something like that. And so the question is are we that awesome? Is it the timing of the sort of accessibility of it, or was it that there were not as many conflicts? And so we're just trying to figure out, how do we get so many people? Let me know your thoughts on that.
Well,
go ahead.
I don't know if I feel like in an in-person conference, technical sessions run more throughout the day, and so there are more conflicts with workshops, whereas in this one the technical sessions were all kind of constrained to the morning and then all the workshops. So I noticed from my end that there were fewer conflicts with like workshops, because all the workshops and business meetings had their own like, you know, hours of chunks of time in the afternoon, so it was easier to attend on my end.
To Christina's point, I figured out a long time ago that the best things at conferences happen in workshops and panels, and research presentations are typically, you can always read the paper. You don't have to go to a session to get the research. So my bias is always toward picking the more interactive sessions. So maybe timing, like Emily said, is part of it. I like the idea of some shorter technical sessions, although I didn't appreciate feeling like I needed to do pre-homework to get to go to one.
I know for myself, and I kind of said this before, is I didn't know about some of the other sessions. Sometimes looking at the big booklet or looking at the big menu of things, it was kind of convoluted and it was hard to find. I think looking at how they had the menu this year, a lot of the sessions were color coded, and so it was easier for me to navigate the online system and find what I wanted to.
I agree with Christina. It was just how it was laid out for us to pick and choose what we wanted to attend. It was clearer. And also I find that virtually you can hop in and out of a session, whereas face-to-face, something else that you may be interested in may be on another floor or across in the other hosting hotel, right? So it made it a lot harder face-to-face than it was virtually to pop in. Yes, this is what it matched what I thought it was and stay. It didn't. I can then leave and go to something else that I had signed up for that I thought would fit for that time frame.
That's a good point. Anybody that is on the call that we don't see your smiling face have any input to Bree's question? Again, just reflecting on ASW as a whole.
I actually put mine in the slide, but +1 to the need for more breaks. Because it was spread out, we actually could do stuff the whole time, and I pretty much did. I do think that my hallway that I did was a really positive thing for me, at least, and not everybody would have time to do it, but there were some people that just would stop in for 5 minutes and say hi as they planned what they were going to do next. And I think I want to figure out how to use this kind of space for my students as well. Like, how do we have this, like you're just walking down the hallway and you see somebody and you can say hi for 5 minutes and then keep going. Like, there's not an expectation that you're camped there, but that you have drop-in spaces. And I think that thinking about how to do this structurally on a larger scale, it would be good. So I don't know how to extend it necessarily, but I think it's actually kind of a valuable space for informal connections. And how do you help people meet the people that they would otherwise not meet in a virtual space, but should meet and would have met in a physical space.
Becky, you're talking about the hallway channel on Slack?
No, I actually I announced it, I think, at the CDI meeting on Saturday, and then in a couple other places. But I had a Zoom channel where when I wasn't in a session, I was just hanging out there, and people could come in and say hi. And there were times when I could say, "Oh my goodness, do you know so and so?" and introduce them and help people connect. When there was somebody that wanted to specifically talk to me, I could say, "Oh, here, I'll be here for 2 hours this afternoon," and they'd say, "Okay, I'm coming at 2:30."
Well, I'm sorry, I missed that, all that information. I think that's always a challenge. I mentioned this in my survey. I liked the division mixer with an online format better than I've ever liked the division mixer before. I've always felt like standing at tables and getting literature, as my old pastor used to call it, about each group is kind of stiff and not engaging. But to be able to go visit a division and meet other people who are also interested in that division, really have a conversation, was fun. I only ended up staying at one, but that was all right because I was having a good time.
Right. And I also liked what the ethics division did. So I think this commission took it as kind of a more like, well, stop in and say hi. The ethics division actually had 10-minute focus features. So how are we teaching
That's the one
ethics?
I went to.
Okay. How are we doing research, and what are resources? And by having that kind of structured time, I think it was really valuable, and people knew when they could kind of stop in and step out.
Thank you for sharing. I would like to ask, I think it's Susan who put a comment in the chat box about sending an open letter to the university president, and one of the inclusion issues they highlighted was specific to inclusion in STEM. So do you mind sharing about that?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I'm at Loyola University, Maryland, and it was a little bit of a news item here and in the Baltimore Sun that a very large group of alumni and current students, it started off with, I guess, some Instagram videos of students talking in general about racial tensions on campus, ways in which they were disrespected, etc. And then there was this letter, open letter sent to the president, but, you know, kind of went through the university community. And they highlighted about 4 very specific concerns that they had with the culture and climate on campus. And one of those was the lack of diversity in all the STEM majors, and where one engineering department, an integrated kind of engineering department in natural and applied sciences, and the ways in which, I guess, things that your folks' research probably address, but ways in which faculty use certain courses as exclusionary, or they were, again, pretty specific about lack of mentorship, lack of support, being discouraged from pursuing STEM majors, and so on. So it is something we have to address in my community, but it does seem to me that, because it started off with, why were the sessions so much more well attended this year, that this really is a potentially transformational moment. And I think that's why there was a lot of interest. So
I definitely agree with that. I do think that it may have impacted our attendance, but I am appreciative of it because it means that people are paying attention and hopefully ready to engage in some action. So I will celebrate all of it as much as I can, even if it's just one more person. I noticed that some people joined a little later. So welcome, Jenna. Do you have anything that you would like to share as far as your thoughts about the conference that we hadn't, I guess, maybe talked about? Is there something that you would like to share?
Well, I am the delegate for the lead division, which has been renewed now. And so I attended their business meeting, and it was interesting that, like the chair, outgoing chair, and I said that ASE is really wanting all the divisions to have, to revise their bylaws and have a DEI clause at least in there, and making sure that it's not just words, but that there is action behind it. And so they brought up the bylaws, and there, sure enough, there is a clause that they would like to add, and he kept on calling it diversity, equality, and inclusion, and that's how it was in the document. And finally, after he stopped talking, I'm like, it's equity, and there is a difference between them. And a few of the people in attendance shook their heads in agreement. So I think really it's an education that we need, that should be pervasive, and how to involve these individuals at a level that they really have internalized this and want to do this right. And actually, it's not just words, but they actually know what they're doing, and they want to take actions and take steps and incorporate practices. Even within ASEE, I think that's really it proved to me that it's going to be a challenge. So.
Jenna, by the way, the board has asked CDEI to update that bylaws template, the diversity, equity, inclusion portion of the bylaws template. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that Policy and Letters Committee is going to be working on in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And then, I'm a member of a different division, and in there, I was just in the business meeting, and they were talking about how, their delegate report, they were going through it, and when the report ended, because they were presenting it on her behalf, she couldn't join, and I mentioned that there is there is talk, and there is the, I don't want to call it push, but the expressed interest on part of ASE for all the divisions to have that. And actually, Stephanie Adams was the president, outgoing president, was there, because that's her home. Engineering Management Division is her home division, and so they were saying that, oh yeah, we have we have a diversity clause in our bylaws. And I said, well, it needs to be expanded to include both diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's when Stephanie stepped in and said, yeah. And actually, she said that morning a vote was taken that will be the case, that ASE is going to actually. So I must have, through my interaction with you guys, that on Saturday before the conference, I must have had that knowledge and I was sharing it. And Stephanie said that actually that morning that the board voted and that's going to happen. But anyways, there's a lot of education to be done. And I think we've got our work cut out for us. So I thought it was a successful conference in general. But I think the work that CDEI can do and the incorporation of DEI in all of the bylaws, and the fact that now these divisions know that it is something that's really important for ASCE as an organization, that perhaps they will be more mindful of it, not only within the boundaries of ASCE, but also in their practices that they will take to their schools and to their organizations, if there are some who are not academic, but they're industry, because we had industry representatives at ASCE as well. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. For timing purposes, I would like to move on to our next question. So thank you for everybody who has engaged, whether it's putting your comments, concerns, or questions in the slide or sharing them vocally or in the chat. I'm open to all. Our next question is, what DEI sessions were useful during the conference?
I thought the DEI 300 session was really good. I mean, we were broken into small groups and I had a great small group, so maybe that was it. But I feel like we had really good discussions. I still have the slide deck open from then because I've been like kind of coming back to it. And it was also because it was so discussion focused, I was able to have discussions with people who were like just entering and beginning to think about the DEI space, and people who were also a little farther along and do some, peer teaching along the way. So DEI, I really enjoyed DEI 300.
I am glad to hear that. I will also say that we got some really awesome data from that, meaning like what everyone shared in that slide deck. And so that's really going to lay the framework for what we as a commission the programming that we can provide. One of the things that came out of our sort of immediate reflection of that was an opportunity to create a community of practice program. And so I haven't fleshed this out completely because I decided I deserve a little bit of break from ASEE. But what we're going to do is to launch an opportunity for people to sign up for small groups. So there'll be, 5 or 6 people, and you'll be a cohort, and then we'll have suggested things that you can talk about, but you can really talk about whatever you want. And then we're going to try to create an opportunity for you to have the kind of shared goal of what you want to kind of accomplish together. Meaning, like, can you create a resource together that we can then share on our website? Our goal is to connect people who are doing like jobs. So like a team of first-year engineering instructors or a team of students, these kinds of cohorts. And so that was I hadn't studied all of the notes that people wrote for 300, but that was one of the immediate sort of like aha opportunities, because it seems like people are hungry for that. So if that sounds interesting to any of you, please contact me, because I'd love to have some support for crafting that and then launching it. I'd like to get it launched pretty soon. I don't want to wait till we get lost into the semester. So I do welcome anybody's support for that. And Emily, thank you for your feedback on 300.
Thank you, Christina. Would you like to share with everyone what you put in the chat, or do you just want to keep it in the chat?
I was trying to follow the guidelines and not talk too much on the mic.
Oh.
But yeah, I really liked, I went to the DEI 100. Like I said, I'm new to the group. And so I wanted to go to that one just to see what the introduction to the DEI sessions were. And I really thought that it was a really good introduction to what people thought was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And like Jenna was talking about how people mistranslate the word equity and equality. It really got into some of those terminologies, and then it broke us out into some breakout groups and looked at some case studies about how we react to certain situations and how we can put actions into place. So I thought that that was a really nice workshop, and how it was put together, it seems like it was really easy to be translated to our individual universities to bring faculty members involved into the conversation.
So I also attended the 300 workshop, and I was very appreciative of how it was laid out, and the opportunities for interaction, and the variety of ways that one was able to interact. I found that to be very useful, and I'm wondering if I guess it's partially the function of the fact that it was a remote conference, so that then you can have your laptop or your desktop open and still be engaged, and add to the documentation. And I really appreciated that component, and then being able to see some of the other responses. Because I think at times when we're in a face-to-face, we're short on time, depending on how many people are in the room itself. Whereas this, it multiplied it, but yet it kept it manageable, so that then you can always go back and read. I appreciated the breakout sessions. I wish we had a little bit more time, but I totally understand. Just so, because it seemed that you're finally getting in a groove, and you're being pulled back into the into the larger group. But I appreciated that format. It just seemed to allow for more communication and impact. Because I came off of the 300 one and felt, wow, that's what a workshop's supposed to be like. And to do that with 70, you said, 70 odd people, and still not feel as if, oh my gosh, there's way too many people in this workshop for this to it's going to be overwhelming. I didn't get that sense. And as I don't forget who said they had theirs opened on their computer. Mine is on my desktop, right? So I'm eventually going to go back and add and just kind of reflect. And for me, that's what a workshop's supposed to do, to help facilitate that.
Well, that means the world to me. I'm really grateful for that feedback, because many of you who deliver professional development, we never really know how people respond to that. And we were trying to create that sense of belonging and community, and it is hard to do with that many people. And so I didn't get to be in the session, so I'm really pleased to hear that. And so we'll take that and see how we can carry it through.
If I can add one other thing, the telling of personal stories at the beginning and having us reflect on that, what we heard and how that made us feel, was powerful, because then you were actively listening, right? And you were then actively documenting. And I know I fall into that at times where it's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, right? As opposed to actually listening to their particular stories and reflecting on it. So I think that's an important part to kind of set off the workshop.
All right, does anybody else have anything else to share for this question?
I didn't go to Safe Zone 1, but I went to 2 and 3, and they were excellent information giving safe zones, but I acknowledge that I guess I've gone to safe zones in the past and I was expecting more interaction and more activities, and just that didn't really happen as much. So, you know, part of it was just the virtual and the sheer number of people that attended those safe zones, especially and this is brought up in the chat. In Safe Zone 2, we went around and introduced ourselves, but there were like, I don't know, 60 people. And so that took up 20 minutes of the hour. Whereas by the time we got to Safe Zone 3, we had switched to the Google Sheet sign in, which saved that time. And so I don't know how Safe Zone 1 went, but I know 2 and 3 had awesome information, but I wish there was more activities and like interaction in them.
That is really great feedback. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm not sure what the name of the session is, so I don't know if it was a safe zone or DI 100, 300, or 200, but I went to the one on where we looked at the online database on ethics. And I really liked some of the conversations that happened in that session. I know I started the session off a little bit later, but when it ended up going into the breakout groups, I know for my breakout group, we were a little confused about what we were supposed to do in that group and what we were supposed to look for. So that could be just a suggestion about just clear expectations for one of the breakout groups that happened.
I really enjoyed hearing the students' experiences in the Engineering While Black session. My son is a student at the university, an undergrad at the university where a lot of the speakers had attended, and he just happened to be in the room while they were talking. And so it was interesting for him to get the opportunity to hear about something that was on his own campus. And he said he wasn't surprised that those were the sad, but not surprised, but he enjoyed hearing from them. And that was kind of a treat of having a virtual conference, because my kids never get to see what we do at conferences. And so that was an unanticipated bonus. And very honest. And gosh, the way the discussion went in that session after the official session was over, and then people really started opening up and the stories really started coming out, that was fun.
Also, I didn't attend that session at the conference because I know it's an upcoming weekly webinar. And so I actually really liked, sorry, I'm hogging the mic. I have so many ideas. Okay, I really liked that some of the things at ASEE were doubled up with some of the sessions. So like Deanna Burkhart had already spoken at the weekly webinar, and she was a distinguished lecturer. The Engineering While Black session is a double up. And that way, when there was a conflict, I didn't feel like, oh, I have to go to this thing right now because it's the only opportunity I have to do it. I'm like, oh, I can go to this during one of the weekly webinar series, and then I can do the other thing that's the conflict with it during the actual ASEE conference. So that was nice for my schedule. I felt a little less pressure if there was a conflict.
Thank you for that feedback as well. That is, that's what I was about to say before you mentioned it, but they are going to speak again. So that is going to be awesome. And I look forward to hearing them talk about it again, because they may do something different. I don't know. All right. And so if nobody has anything else to say about this particular question, I would like to move to our last question. But I also would like to leave time for you to ask any particular questions that I did not put here today. So we will address this particular question, but afterward, if you have a question for us or for the larger people who are here today, please feel free to ask it. So our last question is more or less for me and Megan, but what are you interested in discussing or learning in the future? And for me, when I wrote this question, it's more specifically for the virtual workshop team. But if you would like to say something else about the 100, 200, 300, or anybody else, I will pass that information along as well. So there you go.
I can start. So going back to what I don't know who it was, Susan maybe, from Loyola, who said that you know, at the university level. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe if we know of some universities or engineering colleges that are really effective in doing DEI, if we can have representatives from them, be it within the college or within the university or within, you know, who that office that manages that, maybe if they could come and share their practices so that, you know, we can get ideas. That's why I put in the chat that if you can create packets and share with us so that we can implement in our colleges and universities, you know, I'm very interested in that. So anyway. Yeah, learning from those who are succeeding. That's exactly it. Somebody put that in the chat, and that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, you know, we need to have good role models.
Okay, with that, does anybody have any suggestions for any universities, colleges, or it doesn't matter where you work? Do you have any suggestions for people who are doing great work? At least a first and a last name in the university so I can find them and ask them to come?
Someone in, so we talked about this in DEI 300 in my small group, and the person, apparently Carnegie Mellon, I think, had written a book on how they diversified their, I think, computer science program. And she said, the book is not written very well, but it's not the best written book, but it's very good information in the book. And so she was not part of Carnegie Mellon, but certainly they are possibly one source. I don't know who we would contact there, but.
I've also heard good things about what Maria Clave has done out at Harvey Mudd in computer science and working on diversity in that program.
Hi, Rebecca, can you say the name really quick again?
Maria Clave. I can't spell her name off the top of my head. She's I don't know. Yeah, there we go. Becky Bates got it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
This also came up in the Women in Engineering, Minorities in Engineering Division, PCE mixer. And Trina's not here to defend herself, so I'm just going to throw her into the, no. Trina had mentioned, she had mentioned the same idea. Let's learn from those who are succeeding. And she didn't name names, but I have a feeling that if anybody knows who those people are, it would be Trina. So maybe just ask Trina who she would invite to learn from if she could.
And a similar idea for the future is there were a lot of call to actions in the closing speech for us, and maybe having some breakout discussions on how we can actually turn those into actual items that individual faculty members can take.
I was really fascinated by Linda Vonasupa and Elizabeth Schlimmer and Yevgenia Zistovker's talk about the redoing the circuits lab at Olin. So their talk the talk itself was more on some of the comments that they received in the review paper, and I'm sure some of you saw that. But the lab redesign was fascinating to me, and it got me thinking about whether we could redesign a lot of our labs to be more engaging, more accessible for many students, you know, especially in courses that have high DF and withdrawal rates. You know, at OU, the electromagnetic fields course is legendary. There are a couple of others, and I thought, I wonder if something as simple as just redesigning the lab materials might make a huge difference in helping students be successful. And I don't teach fields or circuits because I'm not a double E. So just have knowledge of people's struggles in that class.
The powerful part of Linda's talk, though, and the presentation was not so much the description of what happened in the class, but their reaction to a reviewer and working fully within their authentic selves to respond to what the reviewer said and to trying to be completely inclusive as they were doing it, as they were exposing their pain in the response and what kinds of stories and histories that triggered. So it's actually a really powerful presentation, not just on, oh, we did some cool stuff, but also how are we in the space of this research field.
Yes, the presentation was excellent. So I'm not saying we shouldn't also have them talk about that, but I thought from a practical standpoint for people who are engineering educators who perhaps haven't really fully adopted a DEI perspective, getting them to say, hey, a quick redesign of your course materials can help people be successive while still, you know, including the rigor that you want to have.
There is, you know, in September, I attended the Association of Women in Science on campus had organized a workshop, 2-hour workshop, yeah. And Leo Taylor from Ohio State University was here, not engineering related, but implicit bias, just in general, you know, very open, and he was excellent. I don't know whether he would charge to attend. I would think that he would be willing to share his time and put on a workshop. It was really good.
And can you say the name one more time? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Can you say the name one more time?
Yes, it's Leo, L-E-O, okay. Taylor, Taylor, from Ohio State University. He is, I think I just Googled his title. He is like the director for their he's with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
I want to suggest that we avoid assuming that people will work for free. I think that anytime you want to bring somebody in as an expert, especially if they are not already volunteering their time in a capacity, I think it's a good idea to at least ask what would they charge. And I'm starting to learn this from listening to different people on Twitter and realizing we have a little bit of an issue in academia because we're used to speaking for free. We're also used to paying for the privilege of going to talk, you know, conference fees and such. And it is a good way to be more inclusive, to recognize that not everybody who has something interesting to say can afford to do it on a charity basis.
Yeah, clearly, if anyone would reach out to him, he would tell us whether or not he he's willing to do it for free or not, but I don't know. I don't know whether AWIS paid him or not, but he was really good.
Hi, I'm Isabel with the Engineering Library Division, and I was a peer reviewer for the papers. And at the end of every paper that I reviewed for the library division, it said, "Is this paper qualified for diversity award?" And I would say no. And then at the end, near the end of the conference or the reviewing period, I got another email saying, "We found some articles that could be given the diversity award." And luckily I had time to do it, but otherwise it would have been a time crunch if it hadn't been for the pandemic. So I don't know how you can funnel the diversity papers also earlier, so the diversity committee can also review them. I don't know if you even saw them. I don't know how the
in
process
August,
goes.
thank you, Isabel, for that feedback. In August, we're going to offer a session on tips and guidelines for how to write a diversity paper and how to review a diversity paper. And so we're going to go over the rubric that's been created, and hopefully we're able to engage the different divisions who are doing diversity papers, because I'm with you. I review diversity papers every year for pre-college, and usually every year I say none of these are diversity papers. Because they say, oh yeah, diversity, but yet they don't actually disaggregate data and do anything with that. Those things keep coming up. And so, yeah, that we're going to try to, somebody's already done a lot of work to provide infrastructure for that. We just need to help people access it, and then help the divisions really set a higher expectation for their divisions on what is a diversity paper. And we'll also call on the paper or the editorial letter that Alice Polly wrote on the case of, like, we shouldn't be looking for diversity papers. People should have to describe why they aren't looking at diversity in their research, right? The onus is on the individuals to explain why they're not looking at disaggregated data and who the work is serving. And so that'll be part of our conversation as well.
Because the papers that I finally reviewed for diversity, they were from different divisions. None of them were from the library division, but they were different engineering divisions and one ethics paper, things like that. So I don't know if there's one way to funnel those through. I have no idea. So maybe with these changes, things will change for next year.
So Isabel,
yes,
the best diversity, equity, inclusion paper competition runs with the finalized papers. So
okay,
mine is the same as the PICCHAIR's best overall paper. So we can't get them until after, because even if someone's paper is accepted without revisions, they may revise it a little bit.
Okay.
And so many people wait until the very last day to submit their final paper. We can't get those from the program chairs until after that day.
Okay.
They are very resistant to trying to get their finalists maybe to finalize their papers earlier and get them to us earlier, because program chairs do things at the last minute also.
Okay. All right. So I understand.
Yes, we would love to have more time, but there are some system constraints here.
Okay.
And thank you for reviewing.
Does anybody else have any other ideas about what you're interested in discussing or learning for the future? And as long as it's related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, please say it. I can't promise it, but I can try.
Responding to microaggressions in the classroom.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. Any others?
I would add to that setting mutual expectations. In the classroom, we sometimes still tend to be faculty focused or a one-to-many kind of communication, you know, lecture based, and even if it's interactive, but really the peer-to-peer interactions are key to students' experience of their education. And personally, I found that in the virtual and online environment, there were a lot more issues. I guess you could call it classroom management, but
So Susan is frozen, at least on my end. Okay, so, okay, she's back. Can you unmute?
yep. Yeah, I have no idea what just happened. I assume you heard the comment.
So it went out, part of
um,
what you were saying, but
sorry, quick version, setting mutual expectations, thinking more about student peer-to-peer interactions, and especially in these kind of hybrid virtual environments. And you would think that people would know how to behave and etiquette and so on, but I think that is part of the discussion, and it would be helpful, you know, creating again sort of basic guidelines, things people can put in their syllabi. Could be something this group could help discuss and formulate best practice around.
thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments outside of the questions that that I've presented here today?
I have a question. So say we wanted to work on a workshop focused on microaggressions. How would that go about? Do y'all put teams together to help, or is that individual on their own and then they submit a PowerPoint and y'all like look it over and be like, yeah, that looks good? Or like, how would that kind of work for putting together a presentation?
So we have a process for that. So you can submit a proposal on online, and I'll grab that link here in a second. You could also find it on the website. And you can build your own team if you want. If you want to be a party of one, you can do that too. And so the proposal is this, it's the same proposal that we have for, we use the same kind of form for ASEE workshops, for virtual workshops, for website content, all these kinds of things. And so let me grab that link and I'll drop it in the chat for you. And then we review it, right? So that's the process. Nobody's submitted anything yet, so we haven't got to that. But ideally, we'll have a review team to look at those kinds of things. And so Bree, if with the virtual workshops coming up in the next year, we'll pick those sessions that are going to be the best for us in timing.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one, just something I've been thought about throughout the conference is how to do some better internal recruitment of members of other ASEE divisions. I noticed that, you know, in the divisions where the sessions I tend to go to, leadership, ethics, the DEI sessions, sometimes we're still a little bit heavy on the female side, even for a conference where women are better represented than they are. And I think there are some segments of ASEE where the diversity doesn't really come up. And we don't see as many men as we ought to see in the spaces where diversity is being discussed. So how could we think just within ASEE about getting more of the people who need to hear the message to come to some of these events? And maybe that would have to do with perhaps doing some more joint sessions where somebody who wouldn't necessarily sign up for a diversity session would sign up for a technical session in their field. If it just happens to include diversity, that's okay with them. And so that we can just get more people starting to hear, because I do feel like we have a lot of preaching to the choir, and I wish we could have better impact across the board.
Thank you for saying that, Kim, because I know when I participated in DEI 300, I pretty much said that in my breakout room group that I would like to see more people outside of the people that I see every week or in the sessions. But I love seeing you all every week. I appreciate your attendance. But it would be nice to see some other faces that wouldn't normally be in the room. So thank you for that. And let's see. But yeah, so thank you. And real quick, to respect everybody's time, because it's actually 2:01. Next week, our next talk is Dr. Phillips, and they will be sharing asset models and research. So please go to our website to register for this if you're interested in the topic. And while you're there, feel free to register for the other topics that we have for the rest of the summer.